Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, folks. You know what this is. Hopefully, you know what this is. This is 120 Months, a show where we are listening to all of the major releases of the 1990s, month by month. We are now in March 1991. I am David Parsons, joined by my good friend John Lombardo. Good to see you, John.
Good to see you too, David.
I want to say this right at the outset. I love making these lists, and I love listening to them. And I also want to say we don't talk to each other about the list at all until we get on these microphones.
That's right.
I have no idea what you think of these songs and these albums. But I thought, just at the outset, I thought this was a strong list. This was one of my favorite lists, honestly. This is one of the rare lists that I could put on and I think listen to it in its entirety and not be as annoyed as I've been with other selections.
There's a way to enjoy every one of these records.
Yeah.
Did you agree with my insistence that we put Jesus Lizard and Throwing Muses on this
Yes, 100%.
Okay,
so we're going to get to these bands, the Jesus Lizard and Throwing Muses, which I will admit, I've never heard them as bands. I don't think I've even really heard of them as bands. Yeah. But now having educated myself a little bit about their backgrounds and histories and listened to their music, I'm really glad we got to know them. So we'll get to them. But we're going to start with our first release of March 1991, an album called Kill Uncle, second solo studio album by a guy named Morrissey. And for those that maybe are younger that are listening to this show, it's hard to overstate how important and divisive a figure Morrissey is for people of a certain generation. I feel like you had to come to terms with Morrissey one way or the other, and he is beloved but also hated. It feels like he's a big figure. He's like an icon of the whole age.
Well, now he's literally a big figure.
Yeah.
He's lost some weight.
Yeah, I think he looks pretty good. I showed you that clip. He still sounds almost the same.
Oh yeah, he sounds great. He's come under fire a lot recently for some of his right-wing views about immigration and
he's like is he like a Brexit guy or something?
I don't know about that. I would imagine that that's the case. I don't know, but yeah, he's said some pretty inflammatory things about immigration and immigrants.
Well, that's interesting considering his music.
It is.
Even on this album, there are some like what I would classify as anti-racist material.
And while he claims to be asexual, he definitely could be considered to be part of the LGBTQ community. He's clearly not a heterosexual male.
Well, he fits into that category that has come up before on this show. When you're talking about the 90s, you have to talk about, I think queer culture ends up being a term that is a sort of umbrella term to describe what we're talking about, which is sort of like an atypical sexuality, something a little different from what is often described as heteronormative, not to get too like academic about any of this stuff, but it just, I feel like I know what you mean when you say that about Morrissey.
Yeah, for sure. And yet he's done things that are offensive enough that he's been he's been satirized on The Simpsons.
Yeah.
When Lisa was in love with this rock star from the past that clearly was
Morrissey.
A caricature of Morrissey, and when she got to see him on stage, he was like this fat, angry asshole who was saying all this hateful shit.
Well, there are people who I think have an allegiance to Morrissey as if he's kind of like a god. He feels like an Elvis figure to a lot of people.
My brother.
Yeah, he's a big Morrissey fan, right?
My brother's probably seen Morrissey 25 times.
That's crazy.
Loves Morrissey. I've seen. I am a Morrissey fan.
I love Morrissey.
So the thing about Morrissey, you probably know this if you're watching this, he was the lead singer of the Smiths, which is one of the most legendary bands of the 80s from the Manchester sound, British pop,
And those songs, he still sings those songs, right? Like the Double Decker Bus one, and like those are Smith songs,
it's called
right?
There's a Light That Never Goes Out.
Yes,
It's off of Queen is Dead. Yeah, I think he still sings that. I haven't seen him in a long time. The last time I saw Morrissey was probably in the late 90s, and he came out on stage, and I don't blame him for this. This was a thing for him. I don't think it happens anymore. But he would come out on stage, and people would just rush the stage and jump up on stage and rip his clothes off and hang on him.
Right.
And he's
like a godlike figure.
He only played like 5 songs, and he left. And I didn't blame him. Like, you can't do it. You know, it's like the Beatles saying we're not touring anymore because we can't. Why play? They played Shea Stadium, I think it is. Was that where it was? And they couldn't hear themselves. The screaming was so loud, and they stopped playing live after that.
Well, it makes you think about sort of what are the elements, and this is like, I remember your brother being super into Morrissey, and I respected your brother so much that I was sort of like, well, I must be into Morrissey then. Like, I in other words, we've said this before, that sometimes when someone's so into something, or you have a desire to like figure out why, you know. But I think that and I wonder what you think of this album, because I hear some of it on here. I think Morrissey's appeal in a lot of ways is his voice, obviously, but not only the voice, the character that there's a longing that he expresses. There's a sort of pathos and sadness that he expresses in his songs that people identify with very, very strongly.
This starts in the Smiths, and it goes through his entire career. He's still making records, I believe, and so he's more of a novelist than a lyricist. You know?
Yeah.
And he's not interested in rhyming. He's interested in telling the story with the metaphor and the point he wants to make. And he has a very unique, he has an English gentleman. It's almost like he almost has a like a foppish way of it's very affected, and he talks like this, and I always saw him as like throwing his hand up to his forehead like, oh, woe is me. It's very dramatic. And but it's also tongue-in-cheek. It's funny. So he's a wonderful character, a wonderful artist, in that he's very skilled at his type of storytelling. He's a great humorist. He's very witty, and he's very confessional as well. And he's not afraid to say things like, if a double-decker bus crashes into us, to die by your side, he's not afraid to say, girlfriend in a coma, I know it's serious. I don't want to see her.
Right.
He just talks about things.
Well, there's a song on here called "Driving Your Girlfriend Home."
You know what it's about? Driving your girlfriend home.
Literally.
It's like Cowboys from Hell. What's it about? It's about cowboys.
You know, I'm glad you said that, because that puts it into some perspective for me. Claudia and I were talking about this list earlier, and we were saying, there's something you said about the 90s, about like 90s punk attitudes, and it's sort of like, that sucks, but I don't really care. You know? That stuck with me, because to me, it's here in Morrissey, the kind of comment, and it's so present in the 90s. In fact, it becomes like, from underground to mainstream, it becomes a mainstream attitude, is this sort of like passionate person that's also sort of sarcastic and ironic and removed and witty. Like, they care a lot. There's the confessional nature of like, wanting to share the deepest truths about love and beauty, but also kind of from a remove, like whatever, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It becomes so dominant in the 90s, and you can hear it on this album.
And he would definitely be very much antecedent to what was called emo.
Yeah.
In the late 90s.
Oh, for sure.
That kind of rock music.
He's like an emo god.
Yeah. He he's a very emotional storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going back to that song. The Smiths' most famous song was it's called oh my gosh, it's called How Soon Is Now.
Yes.
And the whole the chorus of that song is, so shut your mouth. How can you say I go about things the wrong way? I'm human and I need to be loved just like anyone. So there's no poetry to that. That's a statement made in anger to another person, and he turns it into this incredibly popular song.
Right.
He sings it, kind of.
Yeah. Well, the first song of this album is called "Our Frank." And I was like, oh, is he going to be talking about like some guy named Frank? It turns out he's talking about frank conversations, right?
Yes.
But the lines at the end were so Morrissey of him, and I thought so confessional and so clearly expressing his sort of like almost the like angst he feels at being himself. Won't somebody stop me from thinking all the time about everything? Somebody stop me from thinking all the time, so deeply, so bleakly all the time. And like that kind of idea of being stuck in yourself, I thought was so perfectly him.
So this record came out in 1991, but before this he had done Viva Hate, his first record, and that's a very Morrissey thing. So in the context of the 90s, this does not sound like a 90s album. It's Morrissey. It's sort of light pop, really.
Yeah.
And that's what all his music is. And there's we should talk about the history of this record a little bit, but this is his gift to the 90s and where he is influential in that self-deprecating, analyzing, self-analytical, I'm fucked up, I'm a mess, I think too much, I'm in pain. That becomes the crux of rock and roll songwriting in America in the 90s. Whereas before it was girls, 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 and Born in the USA or whatever it may be. Those were bigger ideas, more aggrandized ideas, and this very introspective, broken, depressed individual telling their sad story becomes the people like Cornell and Alice in Chains and Kurt Cobain. That's what they're doing. Even Weezer, to that some extent. Well, Morrissey would have been like the godfather of all of that.
Yeah, well, you talk about the Sunset Strip and sort of like the visible glam metal guys on the Sunset Strip.
They weren't doing that,
right? But there was another sort of. I mean, there were so many different like very colorful archetypes in fashion that you dress the way you listen to music, right?
Yeah.
And there was a coffee house, I think it's the Starbucks now downtown, that used to be called the Daily Grind. Do you remember this in the
Sure,
in Ventura?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was where all the like Cure kids hung out, the goth kids. And I remember some of my earliest memories. So my parents didn't want me hanging out downtown because it was like downtown Ventura that then was a little rougher than it is now.
Yeah,
you know?
It sure was. Yeah.
But we used to pass that coffee house, and I used to look at these, like you'd see punks with like the big spiky mohawks, but also all these like goth kind of guys with Cure hair and like long black trench coats and shit like that. And I'm like, they were sort of like the antithesis to the glam metal guys. Like they were sort of like doing they're more Morrissey listeners, it feels like.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, we all the people in that punk subculture and the little offshoots of it, whether it was goth or like you call them Cure kids, I like that. We back then in Ventura, I thought of them as dancers. You know why? Because the kind of music they listened to, the Depeche Mode, Vans, Smiths, New Order, they would go to dance clubs on the weekends.
Interesting.
And as a punk rocker, I was like, I'm never going to a fucking dance club, So I thought of them as dance kids, but they were emo, goth, whatever.
There's something a little bit more effeminate about them. You know what I mean?
For sure.
If you want to make the connection to queer culture or whatever, there's something a little softer. And like I feel like the punk kids, are a little more aggressive, a little more.
Yes, that's true. And yes, punk was very masculine fueled, and at first anyway, and then. The Smiths are part of that dismantling of masculinity that was part of that early 80s underground scene. The Cure, Robert Smith wearing lipstick, and the Smiths, New Order, all those bands, they were not wearing their dicks on their sleeves like
David and yet Lee Morrissey is like weirdly he's like almost a Frank Sinatra type guy, like
you mean the way he sings.
He's like a crooner.
He sure is a crooner. He's
and he presents as masculine in his own way, you know what I mean. It's a softer version for sure. But
I will tell you, when I first heard the Smiths, my first thought kind of was like, oh, this guy's flaming. Because he speaks almost with a lisp, and he sings like this.
He's gonna pass out on the couch.
And it's very there is a feminine energy to it. That stuff. Hairdresser on file. The way he does stuff. But I loved it though. I listened to him. It drew me in. And then Johnny Marr is one of the great guitar players of all time, in my opinion. The Smiths were just such they created an incredible body of music, that I think that, in my opinion, and a lot of people might disagree with me on this, I do not think Morrissey has ever matched the greatness on his solo career of the Smiths, although he's outsold them. Like his first album, Viva Hate, I believe this is true. I believe it sold more copies than all the Smiths records combined. So he has had great success as a solo artist, but in my opinion, the songwriting has never matched it. And this record was it's an in-betweener record for him. So he had worked with a guy named Stephen Street, he'd been involved in some of the Smiths recordings, and then he became Morrissey's songwriter for Viva Hate. Every Day is Like Sunday as that record.
Yep.
And then it took him 3 years to make this next record, right? So Stephen Street left and went away, and then the next record, which is called Your Arsenal, the next record, and we'll talk about that. He starts working with a guy named Elaine White, who's a great guitar player, and they wrote a lot of great material together. On this record, he had a band for hire. It wasn't like his usual band. They had these guys producing the record that had worked with, I forget their names, but they'd worked with Elvis Costello and Madness. And so and then Mark Nevin was the guitar player who co-wrote a lot of the material with Morrissey on this one. So they this record is an in-between Stephen Street and Elaine White. He's working with this guy, Mark Nevin. And even Morrissey doesn't love this record. He called it, I believe, I hope I'm going to get this right. He said that this album is the crippled imp no one wants.
That's very much his style.
It was very much panned by critics to an extent of like just being kind of light. It's very light poppy. I
liked the songs
wistful.
a lot.
The songs are always good. Morrissey's always a good songwriter, and it's very standard fare for Morrissey. There's the slow acoustic lilting ballads. There's the rockabilly twinged, infused upbeat numbers, and it's Morrissey being Morrissey. So it's cool. It's enjoyable. None of my favorite Morrissey songs are on this record.
Yeah.
It's not in any way connected to what was happening in the 90s, other than what we talked about. Musically, it's light years away from what is about to happen, at least in the United States of America.
I was thinking about that with the music, is that Morrissey, at least on this album especially, I was reminded how much he's like a singer. There's a singer, there's sometimes a singer that has a band backing them, and then there's a band that has a singer. And like we're going to listen to an R.E.M. album here in a second and talk about R.E.M. R.E.M. to me much more sounds like a band with a singer. Like I don't know if Michael Stipe would have a solo career. In fact, he's been allegedly working on a solo album for like years now and has never put it out. It feels like, in other words, when I say that, I mean that like R.E.M. as a band, a lot of the ideas of the music are coming from the instruments, coming from what the instruments are doing.
I know exactly what you mean.
And whereas with Morrissey, it's like, well, there's backing up Morrissey.
I know exactly what you mean. There are bands where, like, okay, I'll give you some examples of this. The way I look at it is, there are bands where no one is replaceable.
Right.
That's the way I look at it. When John Bonham died, Robert Plant told the label and the other guys in Led Zeppelin, no, Led Zeppelin's done.
Right.
And he was right.
Yeah.
You're not going to be Led Zeppelin without Robert Plant. And then I was going to go see U2 at the Sphere until I learned that Larry Mullen Jr. wasn't playing drums. Like,
that's
I'm
right.
not going to pay that much money to see U2 without Larry Mullen.
Isn't that interesting? Because, and a lot of times you just think of like the singer as the soul of the band. And if the singer dies, then the band is over. But I'm trying to think of other examples, like your Led Zeppelin example, where like it's an instrumental player who goes away and you're sort of like, wow, the band is over.
There are many examples of
like
bands.
The whole band.
Van Halen, Iron Maiden, AC/DC, all these bands got new singers and had their biggest hits with those singers. So the singer is not always the most important thing.
Right.
But
like Eddie Van Halen is the sound of Van Halen.
Come on. Eddie and Alex.
Yeah.
But I would, that's a different conversation.
No, he's not. Fuck you. What do you know? Yeah.
but that was funny. That guy yelling at me about Alex Van Halen. Like, fuck off, dude. What do you mean? You don't think Alex Van Halen is part of Van Halen's sound? You don't know Van Halen.
Yeah.
And I would agree with you. I want to wrap that up by saying R.E.M. is one of those bands. Bill Berry, Mike Mills, and Peter Buck are every bit as much of that band as
well,
Michael
they discovered
Stipe.
that when Bill Berry
They
left.
sure did.
Okay, so let's move on to our next album. This album is called The Supersonic Storybook by a band called Urge Overkill. Now this is a band that I had heard of and had heard, especially because they had a big hit that was in Pulp Fiction that you heard a million times.
It's a remake of Neil Diamond's song, Girl,
yes,
You'll Be a Woman Soon.
Yeah, and it's actually iconic of the 90s. I feel like there's sort of a deep a kind of cruel irony when a band that like Urge Overkill that has a ton of albums and was around for a long, long time, their biggest hit is a cover.
Such a bummer.
Yeah.
They don't get all those royalties. Yeah.
Right. And not only the royalties thing, but it's also like they have a sound and they have their own thing. They write their own songs, but the song that everybody wants to hear is a fucking Neil Diamond song.
Yeah, I know, I agree
and
with
if they
you.
and if they're playing shows, which I think Urge Overkill still plays shows,
They do.
I guarantee they have to play that
They
song.
have to play it.
Yeah.
But their version of it was fucking cool.
It's great. Yeah.
So-
they have an
so-
interesting sound.
We're gonna talk about Chicago and Steve Albini a lot this month.
Yes.
Steve Albini looms over this month, and
That's right.
So, I have always so, if you weren't around in the '90s, you won't remember this, but they had another song that was kind of a hit called Sister Havana.
Yes.
You gotta roll, whoa, Sister Havana. So Kiss.
Yes.
That's like, I know Urge Overkill, like when they came out, it's interesting because Nash Cato, who's the lead singer, is not his real name. He was briefly in a band with Lyle Preslar of Minor Threat, the guitar player from Minor Threat.
Wow.
And they immediately realized we're not. I think I heard him say. Yeah, I think I heard him say. He asked Lyle, what are we gonna wear on stage? And Lyle Preslar was like, "What the fuck you wear on stage?" What? He's like, "We're gonna have costumes, man. We're gonna be up on stage." And Lyle was like,
Yeah.
I'm a punk rocker.
No
I don't know what that
costumes.
means.
Yeah.
So
Maybe he thought that was overkill.
but
Yeah.
but Urge Overkill, they were like wearing big gold medallions and fluffy shirts and buying shit they wanted to dress up and wear big hats, and they got signed.
It was a big hat era.
They got their record deal with Geffen because what was I read this. Said like they were such a throwback. They were dressing up in these crazy costumes and doing something that was like taboo among the artists of the time. All the rock bands were wearing flannel and shorts and like anti-glam.
Yeah.
And these guys were glamming it up, and that's one of the things that drew them to them. But I love them. They're this 70s throwback. They've got kind of a funky feel to them.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's just this record is a celebration of guitar.
Yeah, there's a lot of texture to this album. I put it on this morning, and I mean, there's a standout song for me called Emmeline. It's a little bit of a groove. It's a little sort of
About
like
the woman who kills herself.
Yeah, a little downbeat.
Yeah.
And there's something I was when I was listening to it this morning, I was like, this to me is. I'm so glad we're listening to all this music because, as much as people want to hear, when they think of the 90s, they just want to hear, despite all my rage, I am still like that kind of stuff. There's like
that was a great Billy Corgan impression.
There's a texture to the 90s that you find in these other albums, where you're sort of like, this is really the sort of fabric of the culture. And that song Emmeline really captures something. And also it felt timeless in the sense of like, it didn't feel dated and like, oh, this is like 90s bullshit.
Yeah.
These are just like, this is just good music.
This album has a couple albums on the list this month have something that I miss so bad. It just sounds so live. No one makes records like this anymore.
Yeah. Just sound like dudes in a room.
It just sounds so live, and the guitars are. This is what I love about Urge Overkill. I'm a fan of Urge Overkill. They're not very good, but they're very good at what they do.
Yeah.
There's something soulful about them. And some of the drum parts on this album, he fucks up. And they left it in, like it's the drums get off the beat, and he tries a couple fills, he doesn't quite pull off, but what they lack in talent, they make up for in like conviction and authenticity, and there's a soulfulness to it. His voice has like he's like, to me, he's like Paul Stanley and Neil Diamond having a child together. Like they're so Kiss. They're just so Kiss to me. They're just like interested in the rock and roll party.
Right.
They're
But I wasn't rolling my eyes at it.
Not at all.
There's something real about this album.
Yeah. I also laugh, like, if you listen to the headphones, the kick drum is so loud. It's in the mix.
See, those are the things that you notice that I'm like not necessarily picking up on. I'm glad you're here for that, though.
Another way, I do mean this as a compliment. I love this. I think this record is very 90s. It's just a live rock album, and they're trying to play beyond their ability, and I like that on this. Like they're trying to give they're gonna if I saw them, I would go, well, that band's gonna be good in 2 years, because they're not just strumming chords.
They're like, we're in our 60s now, bro. If it was gonna happen, it was gonna happen. Yeah. But I mean, it kind of did happen for them, you know. Like, I mean, I know Urge Overkill, but they don't have, you know, like huge singles.
They don't.
Yeah.
That song, "Girl, You'll Be One," their remake of that Neil Diamond song is really their only big hit song.
And it was Pulp Fiction. Let's be honest.
It was part
that
of the
did
most
that
popular
because
movie of the decade.
Yeah, and not only that, but if you remember, it's not just a background song in that movie. It's the song that that Uma Thurman puts on. Like, she literally, like, and you watch her intentionally put this song on to listen to it and dance to it while she's waiting for John Travolta to come over for the date. Yeah, and so there's this kind of like dance sequence. It's really memorable part of the movie.
But she's waiting for John Travolta to come over and kill her with heroin.
That's right. Almost kill her. Yeah.
There's also, once again, this guy, there's a tongue-in-cheek quality to what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's funny in a way.
Yeah.
Like, he does not take himself seriously. You can tell they don't take themselves seriously. They take the rock part. They're rocking. They're seriously rocking. But there's a tongue-in-cheek aspect to it. There's a drama to it that is humorous, I think. Yeah. But I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was great.
Do you have a standout song from this album?
I really like yes. There's a song called "Scene from Navajo." I love it because it just sounds like Neil Young inspired guitar madness.
Yes,
and I dug that so much. And I also like there's a song on here called "Hoo Ho" or "The Greatest Story Ever Told," and
yes,
that I laughed. It's this spoken word thing, and it's not a funny story, but the way he did it, there's an earnestness to it, but there's just something funny about it. I was amused.
Yeah. Well, again, that's the 90s.
But
this weird mix of like the dark and the funny at the same time. That's Kurt Cobain.
Yeah. My standout song is the "Scene from Navajo," because I want to serve the person who goes, I'm going to give this album a listen, but I only have time to listen to one song. Make it that one.
That's cool. Mine is Emmeline. Go check that
out.
out.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was good. You're right.
It's a fun song. Okay.
Yeah, super fun. Woman kills herself.
Yeah, I love it. Just nonstop laughs. Okay, so let's talk about this R.E.M. album. It's called Out of Time. This also came out in March 1991. This is R.E.M.'s one of two of their best-selling albums. This is their really huge era, and this begins their huge era in 91. And then next year we'll be talking about Automatic for the People in 92. Both are their biggest-selling albums and with some of their biggest singles. And I think the song Losing My Religion from Out of Time is their most well-known song, their biggest hit.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. We have an interesting history, you and I, with R.E.M., and we've talked about it off the podcast, but I just wanted to share with everyone. I think this is really funny and will give some perspective on our attitudes towards them, because I discovered R.E.M. probably around this time, honestly. Losing My Religion was where I knew, you know, I was young and I had heard, you know, End of the World as We Know It and that sort of stuff was around. Stand in the place where you, that sort of stuff. But I discovered and became a serious R.E.M. fan through Losing My Religion, and then listened to them throughout the 90s and all their 90s stuff. Automatic for the People, Monster, and New Adventures in Hi-Fi were the albums for me. And I didn't discover the 80s, earlier R.E.M. until much later, and love all that stuff too. So I'm like a lifelong R.E.M. fan, but I sort of like came at them through the 90s and then discovered the earlier stuff. You, on the other hand, it seems like you listened to them in the 80s and then dropped off from listening to them when they became huge like this.
That's exactly true.
Yeah.
By the time I had dropped out 2 albums before, I think Document or...
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact order. I know Green and Document were the 2 records right before this one, but yeah, I had kind of tuned out. And it's just, you know, I don't have anything negative to say about R.E.M. I think they're a great band. Bands evolve, and they didn't want to do the same old thing.
Yeah.
And it worked out for them.
How would you describe them in the 80s? I mean, everyone uses the term college radio to describe them. It's like indie rock.
College radio was a huge force in the 80s. It's not even around anymore that I know of. But there were college radio charts.
There's a great article, actually, that I just read last week in the New York Times. I'll send it to you, about how college radio is experiencing a little bit of a renaissance right now. And there's like young people at colleges that are sort of keeping that spirit alive. So it's still around. And it's funny because when you say college radio, you don't just mean literally radio at colleges. It means something like, in terms of the aesthetic and the approach.
I would love to see college radio come back, because what college radio and the underground were in the 80s
Mm-hmm.
was a direct conduit between artists and people.
Right.
There was no industry in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't we weren't waiting for labels to release these records we weren't waiting to see the video on MTV before we'd know who the artist was. It was a direct conduit between artists and the people that were just into music, right? And it was very much had a DIY ethic. It was very it was produced in a certain way. We were just talking about Urge Overkill, and Steve Albini produced that record, I believe, that we were talking about. He was he co-founded, along with a bass player of a band called Necros, a punk rock band called Necros. Steve Albini co-founded a record called Touch and Go, a record label, called Touch and Go. There were labels like that. R.E.M. was on IRS Records. It was Miles Copeland, Stuart Copeland's brother. It was an indie label out of LA. But these small labels were getting music out, and the conduit to get it out to the people. They didn't have, huge distribution channels, and they weren't getting their stuff in high rotation on MTV. Their channel was college radio to get music out to people.
That's what's sort of interesting, that like this album is so associated, this Out of Time R.E.M. album is so associated, I think, with its music video on MTV. Losing My Religion is a video that they played 1,000 times, and it, as a young guy, I was super young when this came out, but I remember watching that video. It's like a grotesque video in some ways. There's like it's all like sort of like angels and like sort of biblical looking stuff, but there's an angel that sort of like has a wound that's being like, a guy's putting his finger in it, and it's kind of gross.
I don't know the video.
You don't know this
that
video?
That sounds like Doubting Thomas, the story of Thomas and Jesus in the Bible.
Right, exactly. That's kind of amazing, though, that you've never seen the Losing My Religion video.
I've probably seen it.
It was such a huge part of my childhood.
Yeah, I had really tuned out on R.E.M. Not in a hateful way. I just you asked what the difference was. In the 80s, they were probably the biggest college band in the United States of America. From that channel I was talking about, they were like the heroes of that underground in a big way.
It became known as alternative rock.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I saw them a bunch of times back then, and they were, even though they didn't have radio, they had stuff like Radio Free Europe was a big college hit. That's off their first album, Murmur.
Mm-hmm.
They had a song called it's called South Central Rain. And maybe I should get the guitar. South Central Rain was it goes. You might have you ever heard the song that goes? It was sorry.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It's on the list I'm going to share with you in a second.
So I don't know if I'm playing it in the right key, but that was a college hit. Mm-hmm. So they were having hits on college radio, and so back then their albums were produced they just had a sound, and it was jangly guitar, Pete Buck's very distinct type of picking, and Mike Mills plays the bass in a certain way. He's a busy but tasteful bass player. He fills a lot of stuff
harmonies, his vocal harmonies are great.
Very specific. I want to talk about him a little bit. Even on this album, he sings 2 of the songs on this record. And his backing vocals are very specific. Michael Stipe is a spoken word type of poet. He's not interested in rhyming. Once again, it's very stream of consciousness, imagery based, and they're just this thing. And there was this murk to what they did. Nothing jumped out at you. It was a holistic sound.
He was not criticized, but I think people wrote and thought a lot about, especially the early R.E.M. lyrics are really opaque. They're really abstract. It feels like he's just sort of like painting with words. You're sort of longing to get some meaning or emotion out of them, but there was something like really hard to pin down about what he was talking about.
Oh, I think he's great though. Yeah. Like, he has lines like but you never called, waited for your call, rivers of suggestion driving you away. That's a great lyric.
Oh, I love his songwriting, honestly.
He's got a good way with melody, but their sound was holistic. They were all sort of in this bubble of murk. Nothing was jumping out, nothing was clear. And what happened after, I think it was like on Document, they started to, I don't remember when they went to a major label, but someone came in and cleaned them up, and it got real crisp. Yeah. And someone said, you guys have a good pop sensibility that we can accentuate, and you'll probably get on the radio. And sure enough, that was true, you know? And I get it. Listen, after 8 records or however many records of being this underground, you might be ready to do something else. And in fact, that was one of the things about this record, Out of Time, is they actually said, we're going to really try to change course here. That's why their biggest that Pete Buck is playing a mandolin on Losing My
Yeah, I was
Religion.
going to say the instruments are different. There are
strings,
more players.
Yeah.
But also their style is sort of going in different directions. But at the same time, I feel like in a lot of ways, instead of it just being a departure from R.E.M. sound, it's like a deepening of their sound, if that makes sense.
Some of these songs, radio song,
Yeah.
that's a classic Pete Buck picking progression.
It's still R.E.M. and like to me, there's a continuity there as much as there is a break, if that makes sense.
They play music that is very this is what I didn't care for about the more produced R.E.M. records. This is my opinion, okay? They're very white. Their grooves are very Caucasian.
Hey, they got KRS-One on here. What are you talking about?
He does not belong on there.
Yeah.
The KRS-One thing is horrible.
It's weird, right?
He's a great rapper.
Yeah.
But that's just so weird. What is he doing there? This is what labels did back then. Hey, let's do a crossover.
But it reminded me of the Sonic Youth thing with Chuck D showing up on the Sonic Youth.
But that worked.
Well, they did it minimally. With Sonic Youth, Chuck D is much more like in that pocket of what they're doing. With here, when he's like radio listeners, like it's sort of there's something corny about it.
But because the production's so clean, you can hear just how white the groove is.
Well, yeah, and
it's so Caucasian, you know, like it's just and
what do you mean shiny happy people doesn't have a soul groove for you?
There's not a lot of soul. I feel the murk of the early R.E.M. albums gave it the mysteriousness, the mystique, the soul.
Yeah.
And when they took that away, it's just shimmery, bright pop that I just don't connect with very well.
Interesting.
You know, and
what do you think of this album overall?
The songs are great. It's R.E.M. They're great. Losing My Religion is a great song.
Yeah.
It is a great song. And there's some really good songs on here. And then let's talk about, so Mike Mills always sang a couple of times. One of my favorite R.E.M. songs of all time is called Rockville, Don't Go Back to Rockville. I think that's on Fables of the Reconstruction.
Well, I mean, jumping ahead here, I have a list of my 10 favorite R.E.M. songs, and
cool.
I posted it on Reddit, and like last year, and of course everyone told me I was wrong about everything, but a few people said that's a good list.
You know, I know that's an internet thing.
Yeah,
but you really are wrong about everything. No, I want to hear your list. Let me say this about Mike Mills.
Yeah, please.
I love when he steps up and sings. He's one of those guys. There are great background vocalists.
Yes.
And there are bands that have the perfect background vocalist. And the two I think of are R.E.M. and U2, where they've got a lead singer with a very distinctive way that he sings. And then you've got The Edge and Mike Mills, who are very similar.
Yes.
They sound like those guys.
You can't, I've listened to this album Out of Time a billion times, and I did not realize that both, Texarkana and
Near Wild Heaven.
Near Wild Heaven are both Mike Mills singing lead, because he sounds like Michael Stipe.
He sounds like Michael Stipe. It's like if Michael Stipe was put through a program and said, clean up all the mess. And same thing with Bono and U2. Like The Edge has this really clean, nondescript version of the same voice that sounds really good harmonized with him. And Mike Mills sounds great harmonized with Michael Stipe. And Michael Stipe sounds great harmonizing with Mike Mills when he sings lead.
Yeah.
They really have a nice mix of their vocal. And those two guys, and I'm not sure if the other guys in the band are involved in this, but there's a lot of songs. There's some songs on this record where they've got like 4 different harmony parts going and singing, and it's beautiful. Yeah. My favorite version of that, and maybe it's on your list, is in a song called it's on my favorite R.E.M. record.
Is it Fall on Me?
Yes.
Yeah, everyone loves that.
That's such a great song.
Yeah, and the bridge,
Life's Rich Pageant is the name of the record.
Right. And Mike Mills is doing the bridge vocal in that, and it's one of the most satisfying melodic moments to me in pop music. Yes, it's so good.
The way those melodies play together.
It's just
beautiful.
a perfectly constructed song.
It's beautiful.
Okay, so you want to hear my top 10?
I definitely want to hear.
And what I thought was interesting about this is because we talked about how I came at it through the 90s and then went to the 80s. I was kind of I sort of figured out what albums these are all from and what years they're from, so I could sort of separate. But in no particular order, my top 10 R.E.M. songs. I've Been High. This is a song from Reveal in 2001, an album I'm not entirely familiar with, a later album. But I feel like there's something about that song it's got a special sort of writing to it, and it's some of his most direct writing. I love that song. It's maybe a deep cut for some people. Number 2, Fall on Me from Life's Rich Pageant in 1986, for the reasons we just said. That it's just a perfectly constructed pop song. So Central Rain from Reckoning in 1984. That song is that perfect R.E.M. jangly guitar early sound to me. Find the River from Automatic for the People in 92. It's the last song of that album. We'll get to it next year, but the poetry of that song is so haunting and meaningful to me. And just like the song right before it on that album is also on my list, Night Swimming, Automatic for the People,
That's
1992. Yeah, which is got a great piano melody to it. But also there's some pure nostalgia to it.
If you played just the piano from Night Swimming for me, and I never had heard it before, I swear to God, I think I'd go, is that Pete Buck playing piano?
Yeah, right.
It just sounds like one of his chord progressions.
Well, he does that arpeggiated thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so continuing in the list, Don't Go Back to Rockville from Reckoning, 1984. It's one of their most overtly like kind of country songs.
Don't go back.
Yeah, it's so much fun, and there's a great YouTube video of them singing it like in a dorm room or something.
Mike Mills sings that song.
Yeah.
Right.
I think so. In the video, it's Stipe. So
Is it?
I don't know if it's.
Go back to rock. I'm thinking it's Mike Mills. I could be wrong about that.
Okay. Next is Crush with Eyeliner, a song from Monster in 1994. It's got a guitar sort of sound to it that is really sleazy and sounds like, I don't know what effect they did with the guitar, but it's like sounds backwards. I'll play it for you, or we'll hear it when we get to 94. The song Electrolyte from New Adventures in Hi-Fi, 1996. Notice that there's a lot of 90s albums here. The song Strange Currencies from Monster in 1984. This is a song that Tom York from Radiohead said, I will never be able to write a song that good.
What's it called?
Strange Currencies.
Oh, wow.
It
Exciting. I've never heard it.
It falls into the category of something that I think I wanted to say about Morrissey. What is so great about Morrissey is he creates these worlds where he's talking about common sentiments of pop music, which is like love, romance, and heartbreak. And yet he takes you into rooms in that house that maybe you haven't been before. You know, he finds notes to describe very specific feelings of romance and heartache. And I think Strange Currencies is a song that captures a very particular kind of love. And I love that song. Speaking of love, the one I love, Document in 1987, which is a classic R.E.M. tune. I know you know that one. And then my final best R.E.M., favorite R.E.M. songs, Ebo the Letter from New Adventures in Hi-Fi in 1996.
So you went 1 to 10.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is, it doesn't matter. There's no particular order. These are just the 10 songs that stick out to me. But Ebo the Letter is a song that's features Patti Smith in it.
Oh,
and the two of them singing together. And there's something almost feels inevitable about Patti Smith and Michael Stipe coming together in the same way that in Out of Time it's Kate Pearson. He
has a kinship to those 70s like underground poet artists like Lou Reed. I've always thought there could be a line drawn between Michael Stipe and Lou Reed, although they're very different. They don't sound the same. Although on this album they have a song called Low.
Yes.
He sounds like Lou Reed sometimes to me.
Right.
I go, there it is. There's that thing I've been hearing. And by the way,
it's interesting. I have to think about that. They do have somewhat similar attitudes.
For the record, I have to say I was wrong. Mike Mills did not sing lead on Don't Go Back to Rockville. He wrote the song.
Oh, okay.
But he didn't sing lead on it. So Don't
That's
put that out.
Fun song though.
Don't put that out there so everybody can go, no, he didn't sing lead on it.
Wrong. Next. Loser. Okay, so that's R.E.M. Out of Time. Is there a song that sticks out? Oh, the one thing I wanted to point out. Of my 10 favorite R.E.M. songs of all time, I realized none of them are from this album.
Really?
Even though I love this album. I'm a big fan.
It's a good album. My favorite song on this record is Texarkana.
Yeah, another Mike Mills.
That's the song, but it can't be the standout song because the purpose of the standout song is the person watching this goes, I never really listened to this album and I just want to get a taste of it. And you need Mike Stipe to be singing the lead on it. I do think the best song on this record is Losing My Religion. I do think it is.
You know what I love? If there were a song from this album that I would say is the standout for me, it's a song called Country Feedback.
Yeah.
Which is sort of a tossed off song apparently that they just sort of, you can tell, you know, the lyrics are just like, it's crazy what we could have been. It's crazy what we could have been, but there's something raw and cool about the sound. I love it. So yeah, Out of Time is an album that is a classic for me, and I'm glad it's on this list. And we will hear from R.E.M. again, but we have to move on.
We have to.
The next album from March 1991 from a band called NOFX. It's called Ribbed. It is the third studio album by this band that is in many ways in many ways and in many ways not, part of this 90s skate punk explosion that includes even Bad Religion, I would say.
No question.
Green Day, Rancid, a whole bunch of other bands that were mega popular. In a lot of ways, I feel like these bands gave birth to Hot Topic. The store in the mall where like mall kids will. But
for sure.
That's what I love, and we've mentioned this about Green Day. That's what I love about, even if I don't really listen to this kind of music, this like snotty, fast punk rock. But I always appreciate it, and I'm glad it exists for young people because it's an entryway into a kind of like sardonic take on the world, and I feel like it's most popular among. Wouldn't you say NOFX and these type of bands are most popular among like high schoolers? It feels like youth music in a lot of ways.
I know so many people that I grew up with that were into punk rock when they were young, and they're still into it.
Yeah.
So maybe
it's a lifelong thing for them. They're lifers.
I don't listen to a lot of punk music anymore.
Yeah.
There's some stuff that I do. Mm-hmm. But I don't. NOFX would not be on a list of bands I listen to now.
Yeah, it's like you graduate to Leonard Cohen at some point,
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Or even, I still, I don't know, I still enjoy a lot of, like, if you put on a Descendants record, I would love it.
Well, it's funny because maybe I'm a cliche, but I'm like, we listen to Paul Simon's Rhythm of the Saints, and like I'm in my 40s, late 40s now, and I'm like, man, that is just such great music.
Yeah.
But when I was 20, I would have been like, fuck this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want anything to do with that.
Yeah.
Now I think it's cool.
Gosh, I was really into Graceland when it came out, even though I wasn't. This is a great punk album.
Yeah,
they're
it's
good.
So fun,
and they're such a legendary Southern California band.
Yeah,
they've been around since '83, I think. My first band. I was 13 years old. I was in a band called Ground Zero.
That's a great name for a band.
At the end of Ground Zero, one of our guitar players was Dave Casillas. Dave Casillas actually sold me my first guitar. It was a fake Gibson Les Paul with a Battalion of Saints sticker on it.
Cool.
And that was my first guitar I ever owned. Dave Casillas sold to me. Dave Casillas was in NOFX for a few years. Mm-hmm. So they've been around forever. Dave Casillas went from our band, and then he was in a band called Stalag 13, and then he went into NOFX. And Dave, if you're out there watching, love you, brother. So they're a legendary SoCal band. Probably, I think there's still a fixture on like the Warped Tour and stuff like that. Like this, right?
Yeah, and like a Tony Hawk video game and that sort of stuff, which is where I ended up hearing a lot of this type of music.
When they first came out, they were of a school, like they do have a similar sound to Bad Religion in that it's fast but tight and melodic. There's melodiousness to Fat Mike is the bass player singer, and he's You know, he started his own label. They've been really successful at the DIY thing. He's a legendary punk rock.
They're one of those bands that have sort of stuck their middle finger up to the record labels. Even when the record labels were banging at their door, they sort of kept their own independent thing going on.
Definitely, they could go, what the fuck do we need you for? Yeah. You know, they were making tons of money, doing their own stuff, selling their records, going on tour, making plenty of money, doing exactly what they wanted. Their sound, you could say their sound is similar to Bad Religion. It's fast, it's tight, it's mostly chord progression, although there's some variance in here. But lyrically, they're nothing like Bad Religion.
No, I mean, there's moments on this album where they're talking about nuclear war, or capitalism and socialism come up a few times.
That's true.
But I feel like they're much more like, and I think intentionally so, and it's the strength of their music in a lot of ways. They're much more immature than Bad Religion. They're much more like, he's going to do a song about how he doesn't want to take a shower.
Doesn't want to bathe.
And they're going to do a song about fake boobs and stuff like that. Bad Religion's not going to do songs like that.
Greg's singing about entropy and man's demise. And
and it's in a lot of ways
philosophical.
It's like, these are just different approaches.
Whereas these guys,
NOFX will do a song about boogers and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
They may not go down in history, but they'll go down on your sister.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Imagine Bad Religion doing a song like that. Like, Bad Religion takes themselves so seriously, though. There's there's not a lot of humor in Bad Religion.
There is not a lot of humor in Bad Religion, but I don't find them off-putting in that way.
Well, I don't say that like it's a weakness.
I think it's authentically who Greg Graffin is as a lyric.
Like we said, like some bands' dead seriousness is their strength. Like we talked about that with Skinny Puppy. There's no fucking humor in Skinny Puppy, and yet like this is what they're doing. If there were humor, it would actually break the aesthetic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but
like if Bad Religion threw in a song about the kind of gross stuff that NOFX were talking about, I'd be like, what the fuck? This isn't Bad Religion.
I don't know Bad Religion's songwriting process, but maybe that adherence to almost a scientific approach to lyrics has limited what they'll do musically, because these guys. So I think that Fat Mike really wears his wit on his sleeve. I think he's funny.
He's hilarious. These songs made me laugh.
It's very as you said, it's very adolescent humor, but it's funny. Like new boobs, right?
Yeah.
And, but they did stuff like there's a song on here called what's it called? What's it called? Shit. It sounds like almost like Operation Ivy, like a poor man's Operation Ivy. It's got horns. It's got a like ska feel.
Well, they got that Together on the Sand one. That's like this like sort of tropical.
Almost. Yeah. Together on the Sand. So they allow themselves to explore goofy things that maybe that's a strength that they're like, I made this funny thing up. Let's just try it.
They seem like an endlessly creative band in a lot of ways. And just like Bad Religion, it's their harmonies and melodies that make their songs so catchy.
They're definitely a precursor for sure. They've got to be given, NOFX has to be given credit for opening a door for bands like Blink-182.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
That punk of the late 90s. It's kind of whiny,
and
funny.
Adolescent humor. Yeah. But Blink-182, and we'll get to them because they do show up in the 90s. In fact, I mentioned that ska show I went to at UC Irvine, and I totally forgot that in addition to Cherry Poppin' Daddies and Real Big Fish and Aquabats, the headliners were Blink-182, and this was in 1997, and they were just taking off like huge. And I will say that partly what Blink-182 adds into that mix of fast punk, adolescent humor, a snotty attitude is some of their songs make you cry. There's like really genuinely,
Adam's Song, right?
Adam's Song, a bunch of others that they're really touching. It's kind of it's almost like counterintuitive to the whole project. You'd be like, oh, they're actually softies.
Emo.
Yeah, there you go. They add an emo mix into it that has been incredibly successful. Like that's something that, like we've said, the kind of tough guy that can make you cry, that's a potent mix commercially, I think. People really want to hear that.
NOFX didn't bring any tears to my eyes on this album.
No, not at all.
But they're just stalwarts.
They're hilarious though.
Southern California, they are great. They're a great band. But like even Green Day, probably was listening to NOFX growing up.
Yeah, but what's Green Day's biggest song? I hope you had the time of your life. Like it's like a touching song. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. We're all crying here now. God, that is I can hear the studio guy like, it's gold what you got there, you know. It is though, you know it is, like that kind of that I mean, even Sinatra, he came off as a tough guy, but he can make you cry.
Oh shit,
and,
yes.
I mean,
That's my dad. My dad always
amazing.
said Sinatra's a poet because he could take you anywhere you want. He could make you dance down the street with joy or make you weep. You know.
Yeah.
And so another thing about NOFX, I just think it's important to say because it looked at this album comes out in 1991. It is not a sound that is influential on what we will know to become 90s music. Maybe a little in bands like Green Day, but I'll bet you that all those guys that became famous rock stars in the 90s and their alt rock bands, they were all fans of NOFX. They listened to them.
Yeah, I think everyone respects them. Yeah, I think you're right. You don't hear that. I mean, where is NOFX in like something like Stone Temple Pilots or something like that?
There.
And yet, everybody knew NOFX.
Yeah.
Rancid is going to have a huge moment at some
Yeah.
point too. I think Out Come the Wolves is the name of the album. That's going to be
one
like
of them,
coming up here on our list. Okay. So let's move on to two albums that we mentioned at the beginning of this episode that are from bands that I didn't know, but I'm glad to become familiar with them because they are part of what we said is the fabric and culture of like indie rock, alternative rock. The first is an album called Goat by a band called the Jesus Lizard, released in March 1991. Another album produced by Steve Albini. This was a striking album for me to listen to because it sounded immediately like Nirvana to me in terms of its production and sort of approach to loud, noisy rock.
Particularly In Utero.
Yes.
Which was produced by Albini.
Right, exactly. And so elements of Sonic Youth here a little bit too.
Yeah.
But I really appreciated this album. And again, I would say it's kind of like the Jesus Lizard seems like a really great band that had a very particular sound that's influential, and yet I don't know them, and I think most people don't really know them, in part because they never had a single that charted, and they were never really commercially that successful.
Well, I think that there's a reason for that. So if you were around in the 90s, you knew who they were. Mm-hmm. They were, Albini said that they were the best band he'd ever seen live.
No shit.
And he said they were the best band he ever worked with.
That's
loved recording
something.
Them. He loved.
He made like 1,000 records. That guy.
He made 1,000 records, and they were part of that Chicago, like the Touch and Go Records thing. He produced this record, and the huge. You know what? I love the way Albini records drums. Mm-hmm. He used a lot of ambient room sound, and that's why the drums sound exactly like what Grohl was playing in Euro. Mm-hmm. If you didn't know about Albini, I think like what you did, you would go, oh my God, this is what Nirvana was trying to do in Utero.
Yes,
sonically.
Totally. Yep.
There's a sonic connection between those two records. Guy Picciotto of Fugazi said, in a genre that rightly doesn't give a shit about legitimacy, Jesus Lizard were legitimate anyway, as good as the best that ever played. They had a lot
high
of
praise.
They had a lot of respect from they didn't have a lot of record sales. They weren't popular, but they had a lot of respect from people. They were part of, like I said. So
that sucks. I'd rather have money than respect.
Most of us at this point probably would. Hopefully, money turns into respect, or respect turns into money at some point. But they were on Touch and Go Records, which is that super hip Chicago label. Man, I would have killed to be on Touch and Go Records in the late 80s.
Yeah.
They were doing Albini's bands, Big Black and Shellac were on Touch and Go. Butthole Surfers made a couple of records on Touch and Go. And so they were very influential on 90s sounds. And you can hear it right away. The sound 90s bands were influenced by Jesus Lizard.
Yeah.
They had started doing stuff in the 80s and but they're this is that 90s thing. It's heavy, dirgy, riff oriented, noisy. It's very much the 90s sound.
It sounds like the Pixies too, which is also Albini.
Yeah,
right?
Albini produced the Pixies. Sure, he did. Yeah. I think he did. I want to say that Steve Albini either produced "Come On Pilgrim" or
Surfer Rosa.
Surfer Rosa.
It was Surfer Rosa. Yeah,
okay.
But that blend of the quiet and the loud, that's kind of a cliche to talk about this kind of music, is very present on this Jesus Lizard album. Yeah. And not only that, but the kind of like there's a start and stop kind of element to some of what they're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like the time signatures are sort of keeping you off kilter. There's not a lot of like hooky stuff.
No, they're not
here.
writing pop songs.
Right.
But
this
they're
is
not
like noise rock or art rock.
noise
I
rock,
felt
yeah.
like it was experimental in its own way. Like,
Very much so.
Yeah.
But it's musical. It's not. There's been a couple of things like that we listened to. I think Butthole Surfer's album that we listened to, and I was even a little critical of the that Flaming Lips record that we listened to, even though I love Flaming Lips, but that for being non-musical.
Yes.
This album is not non-musical.
No, it's enjoyable
musical,
to listen to. Yeah.
They actually.
It's hard for sure.
I don't know if we'll get to it, so I'm going to say it here. They released a split single with Nirvana in '93.
Yes.
Just a single. And so they had all the trappings of, they had the respect of the artists and the producers out there in the world. They had the indie creds. They got signed to Capitol Records. We're going to talk about that later, not on this record. So they had their shot. But I think that the thing that makes them super cool and interesting in an underground sense is one of the reasons they never made it on the big mainstream level. It's very much, it's what we, from this point forward, we'll call the Tad effect. Where you got this band doing cool things, but David Yao, he said he's not really a singer. And there's no people, if something's going to be on the radio in the zeitgeist, in the collective of what people are into, it's going to have a hook. It's going to be something memorable that repeats itself and people want to sing along with it.
An earworm, something that you hum as you're walking down the street.
He's mostly Yao on this record.
There's no songs on this album that I'm like, oh, I'm gonna hum this later.
He's mostly finding really interesting ways to shout.
Yes,
that's what he does.
Yeah,
and there's nothing wrong with that. That's cool. Listen to this. Michael Azerrad, who was a music critic at the time, said that on Jesus Lizard albums, Albini recorded on the Jesus Lizard albums that Albini recorded, singer David Yao sounds like a kidnap victim trying to howl through the duct tape over his mouth. The effect is horrific. And so that's his interpretation,
right?
Not mine. But there is nothing to sing along to here.
Yeah.
And so, you pick any of those other bands we're going to talk about that were huge. Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, Smashing Pumpkins, Stone Temple Pilots, Nirvana, Weezer, any of those big bands. They're heavy, and this doesn't take any of their legitimacy away, but you can sing along to their melodies and the great songs they're writing. They're writing like pop songs, all of them are.
Yeah.
These guys aren't doing that.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think this even has to be said, but the idea of us sitting here being like, well, they don't have any hooks, so they never made it on the radio. It's like not all bands are trying for that, and not
Jesus
all, that's not the purpose of art.
They were not doing that.
Right.
Not all music is intended for the mainstream.
But at the same time, they're in a world that is a marketing world, that is like where you're expected to sort of produce or get the fuck out.
If underground music had not become so popular in the 90s, the Jesus Lizard still would have made all these records.
Yeah.
They were just doing what they were doing.
Yeah.
There are moments here. There's a song called Rodeo and Juliet.
Yes.
And I wish he was more of a singer. There's a few songs I'm like, I'd love to hear him.
You can hear the passion and talent of these guys. Yeah.
And sometimes there's definitely his approach too is definitely influenced by punk rock. There was just a few moments when on a few songs, when he reminds me of Jack from TSOL, one of my favorite punk rock bands. He's got a TSOL vibe to it's just the way he shouts a word or something. I go, oh, that's so he's definitely informed by American punk rock too, I think.
Yeah, this is like this has a real sort of a fierce energy to it.
Yeah, it's intense. It's intense.
It's definitely the heaviest album of this list.
For sure.
Yeah.
And Albini did it's not easy to capture that.
Yeah.
In recordings. I felt like my band, Pinching Judy, the band that I was in the 90s, I don't think anybody ever really captured us well.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of record people told me back then, I didn't really get you guys till I saw you live. Then okay, I get it.
Right.
I don't think they did a good job of capturing what we were doing. It's not easy to do, and I think that Albini was the right producer for them. He captured them well.
Yeah, you needed to call up Albini, dude.
Motherfucker.
Yeah.
My standout song is "Seasick" on this
Mhm.
record.
Yeah, super fun song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kick ass.
Well, I think that brings up a really important point too, is the idea of like, how much the balance between, authenticity, legitimacy, those kinds of words, respect, and commercial success. And the 90s are actually a really rich time, I think, for like a big balance between those two things. In other words, there were a lot of bands that made it huge in the 90s that were actually like really great bands, if that makes sense. It wasn't just bubblegum pop. I think it's part of like the hallmark of why we look at 90s music, is kind of like some of the stuff that went huge, that got popular, was stuff that was like really sort of really artful, and the guys were staying true to themselves in the music that they were doing, even though they were becoming like these giant stadium bands. I mean, that's a conversation that will continue, I think, especially with R.E.M., because R.E.M. maintained, like, Out of Time was a really critically acclaimed, respected album. At the same time, it was super commercially successful. And Automatic for the People, I think, is going to be even more so. Like, that album is hugely critically acclaimed. At the same time, it's a giant hit. I think that's a hard thing to pull off.
It happened a lot in the 90s, but it also demonstrated something. So in the 90s, a lot of critically acclaimed albums were also successful. Nevermind was very well received by critics. Alice in Chains was critically acclaimed. Super Unknown by Soundgarden, critically acclaimed, but also super commercially successful. However, I also feel like it really cast a spotlight on how that type of music doesn't belong in the mainstream. It doesn't. That middleman stepping in between the artists and the people and saying, I'm here to really make this huge and give you all this money and put you on the cover of albums and make sure you have a stylist. Maybe that's what killed all those guys.
Yeah.
That music doesn't, it just wants to go directly to the people. It's music of the people. And I think that it being commandeered, that music being commandeered and appropriated by corporate music entities was ultimately destructive to the genre and to the people involved.
Yeah, that's really well put. Fatal to the project and fatal to these people that were the artists themselves.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, it was in Kurt Cobain's suicide letter. He said, I'll never be able to go anywhere and not be Kurt Cobain. Like, everyone's going to...
I've become a brand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll talk about that with Michael Stipe in particular and R.E.M., because they end up signing the biggest deal in record company history, $80 million, after Bill Berry leaves, and they end up making the shittiest albums of their career, and sort of like, I think they went on too long, and I think, we'll get to that. They peak with New Adventures in Hi-Fi, and then it's all downhill from there when they finally get the big money, because what's interesting about R.E.M. is they didn't really get the big money until the 90s.
Really?
Yeah. Because they weren't doing indie stuff. Yeah. When I say big money, I mean, millions of dollars. Yeah, sure. Okay, so our final band and final album is an album by a band called Throwing Muses. And the album is called The Real Ramona. It's the 4th studio album. This is another surprise for me, and another album where I'm like, oh, okay. Now I'm glad I listened to it, because it sort of gives you an idea of part of the scene of what's happening in the 90s. In particular, I was hearing the Pixies a little bit, but more like the Breeders in this one. And in fact, one of the women in this band, it's like 2 women that are the main figures of this band.
Kristen Hirsch is the main figure, but Tanya Donnelly was in this band.
Yeah, and Tanya Donnelly goes on and founds the Breeders with Kim Deal just for like one album, I think, and then she left.
Then she does her own band, Belly, which also had a minor hit called Hey Geppetto, but we'll probably talk about Belly. So,
for sure.
Kristen Hirsch and Tanya Donnelly in this band. This is the last album that Tanya Donnelly was on. She left after this, and I think they made a 3-piece after this. She went on, like you said, on to Breeders and then on to Belly.
Did you know Throwing Muses back then? You were aware of them?
They were super cool. All of my punk rock chick friends in high school grew up and got into Throwing Muses and Slater-Kinney. Those two. So, I think Throwing Muses belongs on this list. That moment in the late 80s, this is 1991, of course, but Throwing Muses started in the late 80s. There's a really important moment for the 90s that happened in the late 80s that was very important for women. So if you look at the 60s, women are there in rock and roll. There's Heart, Fleetwood Mac, even going back to Janis Joplin. Women are in rock and roll. And then in the 70s, as like new wave and punk come out into the underground and the mainstream music moves to pop, there's tons of representation of women in the pop world, and it's all glamorous and sexualized and MTV'd out, right? But in the underground, women are horribly underrepresented. And in rock music, they're not represented. There's great women in rock music. You get Chrissy Hynde of the Pretenders, Debbie Harry of Blondie, amazing, fucking great bands. But on the whole, rock in music in the 80s and the underground music in the 80s, it's very underrepresented for women. There's the Pixies have Kim Deal. She's a superstar in that world. There are bands like Guadalcanal Diary, Red Crow, Laura from Superchunk with the bass player. But it's very male-dominated underground music scene, college music scene in the
where
the
women
80s.
are also big in that era is a genre that we don't talk about too much is country music. Women
Country
were
music,
always very present in country music.
Right. Yeah. But in that underground rock, alternative rock scene, they're there. There's a lot of great women in that, but they're, in my opinion, underrepresented there, right? So then what happens is in the 80s, you get these singer-songwriter women that start, like Sean Colvin and Suzanne Vega, who have hit songs. They're not trying to be Madonna and Cyndi Lauper and Janet Jackson. They're not in a costume looking cute for the camera. They're just artists, right?
Right.
And they have these hits.
Oh, there's just going to be so many of them in the 90s.
And then these bands start to pop up. Throwing Muses is one of those. It's a band of women-led band. They're not trying to be cute and cool for the camera. They're just writing songs, and it's powerful music. There's a band that a lot of people don't know about called Mary's Danish. If you didn't live in LA, you wouldn't know who they were, but they were like a next big thing band. They only made one record. 2 girl singers, kind of cowpunk with a funk bass player. A guy's name was Wags. He played funk bass. 2 women singers. They harmonize in a really interesting way. To me, it sounded like X meets the Chili Peppers.
Cool.
But these bands are Throwing Muses. Those guys. There's probably more I'm forgetting. They're starting to pop up, and that just edges this door open. And then in the 90s, there's all these badass woman artists in the 90s that are gonna like be super successful, change the face of music. The Breeders will be one of them. PJ Harvey is going to be one of them. Bjork is going to be one of them. Liz Phair, Garbage, Shirley Manson and Garbage, like all these great women-led bands that are doing it kind of like on their own terms.
Hole, Courtney Love.
I don't like to admit it. They have some great songs on that record.
They do.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Tori Amos.
Tori
Amos is going to do.
I mean,
fucking Under the Pink is a brilliant album.
Tori Amos, Jewel, Fiona Apple, Sarah McLachlan. I mean, the list goes on and on.
On and on.
It was a huge, huge moment.
Yeah.
And in fact, like the receding of that actually is one of the most depressing things of like talking about the 90s and this peak, because you don't see as many of those figures.
Yeah.
As there was a burst of like. In the 2000s, they would call them like the piano girls. They were like that were singing and doing that, like similar to Fiona Apple and Tori Amos and that sort of stuff. But yeah, when we do our retrospective of the whole 90s, because it's hard not to think about this as like a whole project. I would make the case that PJ Harvey and Bjork are like the top artists of the 90s.
They're both fucking geniuses.
Because they're so prolific. They're
Brilliant.
so fierce. They put out tons of albums, and everything they put out is fucking great.
Just so interesting. Always so interesting. Geniuses.
And that's not me pandering to the women in the audience or trying to be like an ultra feminist. I'm just being like, I'm really just, it's like, objectively, those are the top artists for me of the 90s are PJ Harvey and Bjork.
In the 2010s, too, like all the great singers were women. Lady Gaga, Kelly Clarkson.
Oh, well, now
Adele.
We're back in a lot of ways. You mentioned like the Madonna era, and I like a lot of Madonna stuff actually. But the sort of like when I think of pop stars now, it's Taylor Swift, Sabrina Carpenter, and a million others that are dominating. Olivia Rodrigo. I mean, you could go on. There are a million that are big right now. Michelle Branch is who I was thinking of in the early
Piano
2000s.
Girl.
Yeah, and then there were a bunch like her. Okay, so what did you think of this album, Throwing Muses?
I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, this is from what I'm reading about their history, this is sort of their more poppier leaning album. It's funny because one of the things that I read that was mentioned about this album a lot is sort of what we were talking about. They went a little poppier, they went a little more commercial, and yet they maintained their kind of artistic voice and their integrity in doing that. This was a really interesting album to me.
I feel like it's a little ahead of its time. The single on the album is called "Counting Backwards." If that song came out in 1994, it would have been a massive hit.
Yeah,
I feel like it's a little bit ahead of its time. There's great pop sensibilities, but there's also riffs on it. You know, like it's. I think Kristen Hirsch sounds like a more interesting Kate Pearson. A little bit.
Yeah.
Like she's got a tone to her voice, but and when I say interesting, I'm not taking anything away from Kate Pearson so much, but I just find that the B-52's pop gets a little uninteresting to me that she's singing over. She's a cool singer. And this woman has the same kind of quality to her voice, but the music's more interesting, in my opinion.
It kind of linked up with R.E.M. to me, and actually the earlier R.E.M. to me, because there's like... the sound, the overall kind of tone of the instruments, but also the attitude and approach and lyrics are kind of poetic and abstract, and it felt like this is a sort of cousin to R.E.M. I mean, it's all alternative indie rock. There's something developing in the underground or the alternative place that's really dynamic and different than everything else.
In 1988, Throwing Muses could have been opening for R.E.M.
Totally, for
sure. She was very independent, Kristen Hirsch. In fact, she did not want to be part of they're the first American band to get signed by 4AD, which is a super cool British label.
Cool.
And they got signed to 4AD, and they were sort of got to be a little bit part of the machine in the States, and she didn't like that. In fact, she had a solo album, and she let Warner Brothers release it. It was kind of successful in the UK, and she let Warner Brothers release it in exchange for freeing the band from all their obligations to the label.
So they're still around, not as Throwing Muses, but these two women are still writing and making music and putting stuff out. Yeah. You can tell. I say that in part because I'm like, some bands just, had their one hit and they play that same hit at festivals and to the end of time. But these women, you can feel on this album, have a creativity that's sort of endless. Like they're going to keep putting out new stuff. Yeah. They're they're the real deal.
Yeah. She's an artist. Yeah.
All right. Well, this was, like I said, one of my favorite lists.
Super good.
There was nothing here that I was like, ugh. I think that might change when we get to April 1991. And I don't know if you've looked ahead to the list I've crafted. We'll save that for next time. Thanks, John.
Thank you, David.
We'll talk to everyone. Check out our lists on Spotify. We'd love to know what you think, as long as you're nice about it, and don't call us names. Leave some comments. All right, everyone. We appreciate it. Talk to you later. Bye.